Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, the World Series is over, which means free agency is here. We're going to talk all about dig into the Dodgers' current roster as it stands right now and assess what they need to do in free agency and or trades this offseason. That's what's on tap. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now. Then you can be an everydayer just like we are. If this is your first time with us, I am Jeff Snider. My normal co-host is Vince Samperio, although it's just me today. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. And with that said, it is now officially the offseason. The Rangers finished their pretty dominant World Series victory over the D-backs. They won 4-1. The Rangers became just the second team in Major League history to win 13 games in one postseason. The other team was the 2020 Dodgers. The Rangers went 11-0 on the road in the postseason, which is just ridiculous. All in all, really good run for the Rangers. Happy for them. Corey Seager wins his second career World Series MVP. Former Dodger Josh Sborz finished off the game for the Rangers. He wasn't going to stay in the game probably. He had gotten 4 outs already, but then the Rangers put up a 4 spot in the top of the 9th. And so with their closer having pitched the last 2 days, they thought, well, let's let Josh Sborz finish it off. And he did, which kind of a remarkable story in itself. Sborz really struggled during the regular season, especially late in the season, but got to be on the mound for winning a World Series, and that sticks in fans' minds forever. So happy for him, happy for Corey, and happy that it's now the offseason, because now free agency begins. By the time you're listening to this, probably free agency has started. I'll probably actually drop this episode about 4 hours before free agency officially starts, but you'll probably still be in bed. Free agency starts at 6 a.m. Pacific time on Thursday. And that means that the sweepstakes for Shohei Ohtani begins. Yoshi Yamamoto. I'm going to just assume he's going to go by Yoshi because I have a really hard time saying Yoshinobu Yamamoto. So I'm going to say Yoshi Yamamoto. That's a little bit easier for me. That's a big one. There's so many potential free agents this offseason. We're going to dig into some of the specifics as far as players we think they might want to target on future episodes. Today, we're going to be just looking inward at the Dodgers' current roster as it stands and assess what their needs are. We talked a couple days ago about their 40-man roster and the roster crunch that's coming and everything. That's part of this, but we won't dig into that more. If you want to listen to that episode was a few days ago. But we will be looking at who they have at what positions, what are positions of need, and what we, at least kind of try to get a feel for what their approach might be this offseason. And so let's just go position by position, I guess. Right now, they have 34 players on their 40-man roster. They have 6 team options for next year that they have to decide on. Max Muncy is the only no-brainer for me among those 6 options. Like I talked about on the episode the other day, there's a couple other guys, Blake Trinan, maybe it's only $1 million if they actually think he might pitch. But maybe they have run out of patience with Trinan. Alex Reyes, I have no idea. We have no idea of knowing what they see in him. Daniel Hudson, if he doesn't want to retire, maybe. So Joe Kelly, Lance Lynn seems like an obvious no at this point. But so I'm going to just assume Max Muncy, they exercise that, which puts him at 35 players. And we'll go from there and we'll kind of dig in. So I guess let's look at the bullpen to start with. So right now they've got Yancy Almonte, Caleb Ferguson, JP Fireeisen, Victor Gonzalez, Bruce Dargratero, Brian Hudson, Evan Phillips, Gus Varland, and Alex Vesia. Now, among those, you got Phillips and Gratterall, who, yeah, those guys are mainstays of the Dodgers bullpen at this point. Those guys are going to be two of the top relievers in their bullpen next year. Yancy Almonte was really good in 2022, not nearly as good in 2023. You say the same thing about, Caleb Ferguson and Alex Vesia. A lot of those guys are lefties. They've got, in addition to Ferguson and Vesia, they got Brian Hudson and Victor Gonzalez, a lot of left-handers, and none of them just scream, this guy's awesome. Gus Varland, like the bullpen is definitely a position of need. Now, the question is, how will they address that need? Because there is Josh Hader, there is Aaron Hicks on the free agent market. Neither of those guys would totally shock me if the Dodgers went after him. I think Josh Hader would be an interesting addition to this Dodgers bullpen for sure. He's still got very, very good stuff. There's some question marks there, but overall, his stuff is still very good. So he could be an interesting addition. Another possibility is, in the next segment, we're going to talk about the starting pitching, and the Dodgers do have a lot of young starting pitchers, some of whom could spend some time in the bullpen if they chose to go that route. And then there's also a couple of guys, Ryan Brazier and Shelby Miller specifically, who are now free agents, but both had rejuvenating career years with the Dodgers this last year, and both might be interested in coming back to the Dodgers. It's also possible that they both want to go the Brandon Morrow route of I rejuvenated my career and now I want to go get paid somewhere. And so maybe that happens with both of those guys, but I wouldn't be shocked to see one or both of those guys back. And if you bring back Brazier and Miller, suddenly that's a pretty darn good bullpen that, built on Bruce Dargratero, Evan Phillips, Ryan Brazier, and Shelby Miller. Like, you can fill in the gaps beyond that. That is a very good top four. Throw in, Josh Hader, and boom, you've got a really good bullpen there. So the bullpen is something that they will address. I started with this one because it's maybe the one they're least likely to address through free agency, or at least fully through free agency. Just because relievers are so volatile. A guy who's good one year isn't going to be good the next year necessarily. There's so many question marks around relievers, and the Dodgers are very rarely the team that's throwing big money at relievers. And so, they've got some internal options. There are some external options. That one will be interesting to see what they do. It's definitely something they'll address, but I don't know that it's like at the top of their priority list, simply because it is addressed in a different way than a lot of other positions are. So I'm going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk about the starting pitching, and then we'll dig into the position players and kind of look at the depth charts in all of those places and see what the Dodgers need to do. So I'll be back with that. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. In fact, you could do it today. It's Thursday, which means tonight is Thursday Night Football, and it's the Titans against the Steelers. Titans are 3-4, Steelers are 4-3. Maybe neither team is quite what they hoped to be this year, but if you've got a good feeling about one of those teams tonight, put $5 on it. You can get your $150 bonus bets just by winning a $5 bet in tonight's Thursday Night Football game. Or if you're more comfortable, wait until the weekend. A lot of NFL games this weekend. That's the great thing about this deal. You can pick the easiest one. Like if there's a no-brainer game this weekend, you're like, okay, I know for sure who's going to win this game. Put $5 on it, get your $150 in bonus bets, and then you can really get in. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Hey, I'm back. I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Especially want to thank our everydayers, those of you who are with us every weekday morning. If you're not an everydayer, it's real easy to become one. Just watch or listen every weekday morning. It's a lot of fun. We love talking Dodgers with you, and we hope that you will, come around every day. I also want to remind you, even though baseball season's over, there's still a ton of baseball content on SiriusXM and the SXM app, MLB Network Radio. If you want to keep up on free agency all off season, there's some great baseball talk radio on SiriusXM you can check out on in your car or on the SXM app. You can also listen to this podcast on the SXM app just by searching for Locked On Dodgers. And if you are watching this on YouTube, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the YouTube comments section. If you're listening on the podcast, we'd love to hear from you through social media or email or whatever. I'll give you all that contact info at the end, like I always do. And with that said, let's look at the Dodgers starting pitching, because that is an area that everybody's saying it's a position of need for the Dodgers, that it's a top priority for them in free agency. And I get why people are saying that, and I don't necessarily disagree. But I also think when you look at just who the Dodgers have in their organization right now, they could have a pretty solid rotation just with who they currently have. And some of it, the big thing is the risk there, because most of what they have right now is very, very young. Here's the guys they have right now on the 40-man roster or likely to be added to the 40-man roster in the next month or so to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. We've got Walker Buehler returning from Tommy John surgery, Michael Grove, Kyle Hurt, Bobby Miller, Ryan Pepiot, Emmett Sheehan, Gavin Stone, and Ryan Yarbrough. Those guys, I had just listed them in alphabetical order by their last names. Those are the 8 pitchers currently on the Dodgers 40-man roster, starting pitchers who will be available next year. You also have Tony Gonsolin and Dustin May, both of whom are recovering from Tommy John surgery. May will hopefully be back at some point during the season. But, there's no guarantee. Tony Gonsolin is further behind there, probably going to miss the entire 2024 season. And then you've got Landon Knack and Nick Frasso, both of whom will likely be added to the 40-man roster to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. So that's 10 starting pitchers, not counting Gonsolin and May because they won't be ready. But you've got 10 starting pitchers there. 8 of them are rookies or, either will be rookies in 2024 or were just rookies in 2023. And so it would be a risky situation. If the Dodgers were a team that didn't expect to compete for the World Series title every year, I think they would be going into 2024 saying, let's see what we got in all these young pitchers. And I think to some extent they might do that. Not fully, though. They're not going to fully do that. Some of these guys are probably going to be traded, whether it's for a more established starting pitcher or for another position of need. Even if they were really ready to commit to the youth movement, 10 starting pitchers is too many. And I guess Ryan Yarbrough isn't part of any youth movement, so he would be an easy one to remove, but that still leaves you 9 guys. And this is all if Clayton Kershaw doesn't come back. Clayton Kershaw might come back. If he wants to come back to the Dodgers, he will be back with the Dodgers. And so that could be an 11th starting pitcher. So they have a lot of options here. Walker Buehler, first year back from Tommy John surgery, they'll somewhat treat him with kid gloves, not entirely, but they will have some limits on him. Bobby Miller kind of established himself as a top-notch pitcher for the Dodgers last year. He will be heading into his sophomore year, and not no restrictions, but they're going to let him loose. Ryan Pepiot hopefully will be healthy and for the whole season. And, because he pitched so few innings this last year, they may keep an eye on his innings count. All these young guys, it might make a lot of sense to do some piggybacking, to do some, go with a 6-man rotation that includes 7 or 8 guys. I think back to 2022 when the Dodgers started the season with Tony Gonsolin and Tyler Anderson piggybacking. And by midseason, they were both on the All-Star team because injuries made it necessary. They were both in the rotation. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be things that come up that bump guys. And so having this much pitching depth is a good thing. But I do think they're going to go after some pitching. I think Yoshi Yamamoto from Japan is going to be a guy they're very interested in. I think that another, whether it's trying to trade for Corbin Burns or Dylan Cease or somebody like that who's not a free agent but might be available in a trade, maybe they might look at one of the established starting pitchers, Blake Snell or Aaron Nola, or I can't remember who else there is right now. I know there's a third one that I'm forgetting right now. There's options. There's also lesser tier. We're gonna dig into like Kenta Maeda and Hyunjin Ryu are both free agents, both former Dodgers, both unlikely to command huge contracts. Both veterans. They could be guys depending on the approach they want to take. If they want to have some veteran guys who they're not necessarily counting on to pitch the whole season, not necessarily counting on to be aces in the postseason, but to get them kind of bridge the gap to these young pitchers, those are possibilities. But I think they'll probably swim in the higher end of the market, going for whether it is one of the top free agent guys or, trading for a Corbin Burns type. I think that's the approach they're going to take because the Dodgers, they have the depth. What they need is that top of the rotation stuff. Walker Buehler, when he's healthy, he is that guy. Bobby Miller, I think, is going to be that guy. I don't know if he's going to be that guy in 2024. I don't know if Walker Buehler is going to be that guy in 2024. And so I think that's the bet they need to hedge a little bit, is to say, okay, well, while we see what we have in Buehler and Miller and Pepio and Gavin Stone and Emmett Sheehan, all these guys, Kyle Hurt, while we see what we have in them, we need some established aceness. And, whether that is Yamamoto or Burns or both of those guys, I think that would be a really good problem to have, of having to figure out, okay, do we trade some of these young pitchers or do we keep them in AAA as depth because there will be injuries? All those things will come into play. But I think starting pitching is going to be the most fascinating thing this offseason to see what the Dodgers do, simply because there's so many different approaches they could take. And, I see Dodger fans all the time saying that the Dodgers are trying to take the cheap route and they need to go get the high end stuff. The fact is, every great pitcher was once a rookie. And unfortunately, the nature of baseball, most of those guys don't come up as Dodgers. Clayton Kershaw did, Walker Buehler did, and other guys. The Dodgers have had plenty of pitchers come up through their organization, but Corbin Burns, the Brewers were able to stick with him when he was one of the worst pitchers in baseball because they're the Brewers. Yeah, they compete in the Weekend L Central every year, but they don't have the expectations the Dodgers do. Other guys, Garrett Cole came up with the Pirates, who don't have any expectations, and he was able to play into that and become an ace, and then take that next step with the Astros and then with the Yankees. All those things, it's like the Dodgers are at a little bit of a disadvantage there because they are competing for a championship every year. They can't necessarily afford to give some of these young guys the leeway that some other teams might be able to afford to. But I think they're going to try to walk that line and find that balance to say, all right, we've got our top end guys, and now let's see if they could turn 3 of those 7 other guys into really, really good major league pitchers. Ideally, figure out which 3 it's going to be and keep them and trade the other guys. That would be, and they've done a pretty good job. When they traded Jose De Leon for Logan Forsythe, there was a lot of consternation among fans of giving up. I kept seeing Pedro Martinez comparisons. Jose De Leon didn't turn into Pedro Martinez, but then you look at other guys like somehow, what's that dude's name? I can see his face. Brock Stewart turned into a really good relief pitcher for the Twins this year. Josh Sports just closed out a World Series. Those are two guys who, with the Dodgers, like, okay, well, they're never going to really play a big role on this Dodgers team. And so they moved along and other teams were able to find use for them. It's going to happen in baseball. The fascinating part of this starting pitching conundrum for the Dodgers will be figuring out, okay, which of these guys do we believe in long term, and let's commit to those guys, and the other guys, let's see if we can package them, get them to headline a deal to fill other needs that we have. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch this offseason, and starting pitching is definitely something they're going to address. I'm going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk about the position player needs that they have, kind of look at the depth chart at the different positions and see what the Dodgers might do there. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please continue to keep it Locked On Dodgers. Hey, I'm back. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember to check out SiriusXM and the SXM app for all your baseball needs, and you know what? All your music needs too. Now that it's the off season, it's also Christmas season. SiriusXM has awesome Christmas stations. I love the country Christmas station. Check that one out. They're all available. I think they're all available already on the SXM app. I'm not sure when they will be in your car. Last year was November 1st. I actually didn't remember to check today when I was in my car to see if they've started the Christmas stations yet. But man, Christmas music on SiriusXM, good stuff. Christmas music anywhere is good stuff. I've been listening for months, but now I can admit it because now it's November. I think that's, yeah, thanks for our everydayers, all that stuff. All right, let's talk about the position players. We're just going to go position by position and look at who the Dodgers have either on the 40-man roster or, in one case, likely to be added to the 40-man roster. Guess we'll start with that one. Let's look at catcher. They have Will Smith, who is our starting catcher. They have Austin Barnes, who, as of right now, is their backup catcher. They have Diego Cartaya on their 40-man roster, and soon to be on their 40-man roster, most likely, is Hunter Fiducia. Now, I don't know if the Dodgers are going to go with 4 catchers on their 40-man roster. Honestly, if they're adding Hunter Fiducia to the 40-man roster to protect him for the Rule 5 draft, that might make Austin Barnes expendable. Barnes is still under contract for another year, but Barnes is the kind of guy who he's not going to bring back much in a trade, but a younger team could definitely value Austin Barnes' veteran leadership experience, all that stuff, in a way that the Dodgers might be able to get something of value, or at least not have to give up anything of value to get rid of him. And if Clayton Kershaw doesn't come back, I said this the other day, I think that would make it more likely that Barnes goes somewhere. They could go with 4 catchers on the 40-man roster, but then, I also talked about they could package up Diego Cartaya in a trade if another team was willing to treat him like the top prospect he was prior to 2023. They could trade Fiducia. There's so many options they could do. I have a hard time seeing them actually carrying 4 catchers on the 40-man roster, so I expect some movement there. But one thing we know for sure, Will Smith is going to be the starting catcher as long as he's healthy, and hopefully, he'll be awesome. And then down the line a little bit, Dalton Rushing is knocking on the door, and 2024 could be a year that he makes his presence known and kind of forces the issue and forces the Dodgers to think long and hard about him. That's catcher. Moving on to first base, they have Freddie Freeman. He's going to play pretty much every day. They also have, assuming they exercise Max Muncy's option, they have Muncy, who can play first base, who was legitimately a great defensive first baseman before they signed Freeman. Then they have Michael Busch, who was a first baseman in college, hasn't played a lot of first base since college, but that's their 3 first basemen. When one of your first basemen is Freddie Freeman, you don't need much else. And so while it's one of their least deep positions, it's also the one that I have the least concern about, at least at the moment, as long as Freeman's healthy. Second base, they have 5 guys who can play second base. None of them might be their first choice to play second base. You got Gavin Lux, Mookie Betts, Max Muncy, Michael Busch, and Miguel Vargas. And all of those guys, well, at least the first three, Gavin Lux, Mookie Betts, and Max Muncy, I think in the ideal Dodgers lineup, maybe all three of those guys are starting at other positions, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then you've got Bush and Vargas. And I think Bush and Vargas, I have that written down as one of the biggest needs this year is to figure out what they're going to do with Michael Bush and Miguel Vargas, because both of those guys are bat first prospects who we need to find somewhere to play for them to play defensively. Vargas was a decent second baseman, but the Dodgers' overall defensive numbers got much, much better this last year after they sent Vargas back down and moved Mookie Betts to being the main second baseman. And so I don't know if Vargas is the answer. He had never played second base before 2023. He's a very good athlete. Maybe he can turn himself into a good second baseman. I don't have any idea how good Bush is defensively at second base. He's played there in the minors, but it seems like he's pretty low on their totem pole as far as second basemen go. So second base will be a really interesting thing because it could be something they go out and sign somebody else, or they could, if they sign a third baseman and say, Max Muncy, you're going back to second base. Muncy, when he was a solid second baseman, that was when there was the shift. I don't know that Muncy has the lateral quickness to be a good second baseman without the shift. And so, maybe Gavin Lux coming off of his knee injury, they don't want to throw him right in at shortstop. And so they go with him. Maybe they like Mookie Betts at second base and they, and maybe maybe I should transition to the outfield now. We'll get back to shortstop and third base in a minute. But since we're talking about Mookie Betts, outfield is, they have plenty of guys who can play the outfield, but it's also their weakest area as far as depth goes. Because like if the season started today, you'd have Chris Taylor in left, James Outman in center, and Mookie Betts in right field. Taylor can also play center. Johnny DeLuca can play center or left. Michael Bush theoretically can play left. Miguel Vargas theoretically can play left. I don't think Bush or Vargas are high on anybody's list of guys they want in left field. And then you've got Andy Pages, who, if he plays the position, it's going to be right field. He might be just a DH going forward. It's tough to tell. But so they've got guys who can play the outfield, but maybe they go after, an outfielder, a right fielder in a trade or in free agency and say, hey, Mookie, you're a second baseman now. And last year in the offseason, we talked about the idea of them maybe going after Aaron Judge and moving Mookie Betts to second base. I didn't like that idea because Mookie is a better defensive right fielder than Aaron Judge. But seeing how Mookie Betts took to second base, played it really well, I think that there is something to the idea of him becoming a second baseman. Second base is a very valuable, it's actually more valuable of a position than right field for a guy of his offensive prowess. And so, theoretically, you can find a good right fielder more easily than you can find a good second baseman. And so he might be able to provide more value to the Dodgers at second base. And so this outfield depth, while they've got 6 guys who are outfielders, it's a position that they need to address because do you really want Chris Taylor playing every day? James Outman, I think, is an everyday player. Mookie Betts is obviously an everyday player, but every day in right field, we don't know. So there's things to address there that will be pretty interesting. Going back to the infield, third base, you've got Max Muncy, who had his ups and downs. He made some big improvements defensively at third base, but then some of those went away again. He's not as sure-handed as you would like at third base. Matt Chapman is a free agent. Nolan Arenado could be on the trade block. There's possibilities at third base. And maybe they exercise Muncy's option just to trade him somewhere because he did hit whatever it was, 36, 37 home runs this last year. And so there could be some value there. He'd definitely be a bargain at the $14 million he's going to get paid. So if the Dodgers want to trade him, they'll be able to trade him. But he could be their starting third baseman. Bush and Vargas have both played third base, but obviously the Dodgers aren't totally sold on them. Chris Taylor has played some third base. Jorge Vivas in the minor leagues, he's on the 40-man roster. He's played some third base. I said the other day, I don't see Vivas actually fitting on this Dodger team ever And so I expect him to be shuttled off one way or another this offseason, ideally in a trade. And then shortstop. Gavin Lux, if they feel good about him in his first year back from his knee injury, being the shortstop, he was going to be the starting shortstop in 2023 before he got hurt. Maybe they just say, okay, now you are starting shortstop in 2024. If not, they do have Miguel Rojas under contract for another year. Mookie Betts has played some shortstop. Chris Taylor can play shortstop. They've got options. But like when you look at this, it's clear that there are position player needs for the Dodgers, but you could kind of make a case for a lot of different positions as to where that need is. That's a good thing because it means they can just focus on, okay, let's look at free agents. Who is available? And we can sign these free agents and shuffle guys around. Okay, how does this make our overall defense look? Let's look at this. So there are a lot of options. There's definitely needs on the offense, on the position player side, though, because right now, while they have guys to play every position, it would not be the ideal lineup and the ideal defensive configuration. So they've got things to figure out. That kind of is your rundown. Oh, and then DH. Right now, they don't have a DH. Shohei Ohtani obviously is the big target at DH. They could use Muncy there. You could use Vargas or Bush there. Andy Pajes could be the DH. A platoon of Pajes and Bush, or whatever. There's options there. Shohei Ohtani is the first choice, obviously. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. That's kind of the rundown. Like I said, we're going to spend a lot of time this offseason talking about specific players and who we think they should go after. This is just kind of assessing what they need and what they need to do. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Especially thank you to our everydayers. We really appreciate you. Be sure to check out SiriusXM, baseball needs, Christmas music needs, everything you need. Search for Locked On Dodgers on the SXM app if you want to listen to this podcast there. You can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSince91. I'm on Twitter at Snydog. Our DMs are open in both of those places. You can email us, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or you can send us a voicemail or a text message at 323-863-LOCK, 5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.